New York City, morning of November 11, 2006. The clock struck 6:15 when Donna Cobb, 38 years old, called the emergency 911 hotline from her apartment in Harlem. Her voice was urgent, panicked. "My husband needs an ambulance," Donna told the dispatcher. As a nursing assistant at Harlem Hospital Center, Donna understood the severity of the situation. She gasped for breath, trying to explain. "I fought with my husband, Kevin Cobb, 39 years old. I hit him with something. I don't know if he's breathing. His heart is still beating, but I call him and he's not responding." The dispatcher asked, "What did you hit him with?" Donna hesitated for a moment before replying, "A small elephant, a ceramic elephant." What seemed like a harmless blow had left Kevin motionless on the floor, setting off an investigation filled with surprises and untold secrets. As the ambulance raced to the scene, Donna, relying on her medical training, did everything she could to help Kevin. She knelt beside him, desperately trying to maintain his breathing. When the EMTs finally arrived, they quickly took over CPR from Donna and immediately used a defibrillator. Flashing lights reflected off the walls as they lifted Kevin onto the stretcher, rushing him down the stairs to the ambulance. No one could be sure if he would survive. Amid the blaring sirens echoing through the cold morning air, the police turned to Donna for answers. But as they looked at her, they realized she wasn't much better off than her husband. Donna trembled, her gaze empty, as if she had just endured a never-ending nightmare. Donna Brown was born in 1968 in Georgia, but her heart always belonged to Harlem, where she considered her true home. As a teenager, Donna possessed striking beauty, drawing attention wherever she went. However, her life took an unexpected turn in her final year of high school when she discovered she was pregnant. After giving birth, Donna refused to let it hinder her future. Determined to succeed, she enrolled in the Advanced Vocational Academy. Shortly after graduating, she began working as a certified nursing assistant. Hardworking, dedicated, and always full of energy, Donna not only earned the respect of her colleagues but also became a beloved figure among patients. Yet, despite her success at work, her personal life was plagued with bad relationships. By 1992, at the age of 23, Donna was already a single mother of 4, bearing the full responsibility of raising them with pride. It was during this time, when she was solely focused on her family and career, that Kevin Cobb, a 24-year-old man, stepped into her life, determined to win her attention at all costs. Kevin Cobb, a young man from the Bronx, first met Donna in 1992 while standing on a street corner in Harlem. That day, Donna was rushing to pick up her daughter, but Kevin wasn't about to let the opportunity slip away. He tried to strike up a conversation, even though Donna, a busy mother of 4, clearly had no time to stop. However, Kevin's persistence was undeniable. He followed her for 10 blocks, chatting nonstop, and in the end, he won her over. Kevin gave his heart entirely to Donna, and his love made her more willing to embrace the relationship. A year later, in 1993, Kevin moved in with Donna. But from there, harsh reality began to set in. Kevin was unemployed, meaning Donna had to shoulder the financial burden for the entire family alone. In 1998, they welcomed a set of twins, the embodiment of their love. At this point, their small home became more cramped than ever with 6 children. Donna, with a modest salary as a nursing assistant, struggled to provide for the whole family. She hoped Kevin would help by spending time with the children or assisting with their schoolwork. But instead, he was often out all night and slept through the day. A creeping sense of unease began to settle in Donna, and she started to suspect Kevin was involved with drugs. Her fears were soon confirmed. One afternoon, Donna found undeniable evidence. When she confronted Kevin, he tried to justify himself, promising to quit and find a job to support the family. But these were empty words. His addiction worsened, and by 2001, Kevin was arrested and sentenced to 2 years in prison for drug use. At first, Donna felt relieved that Kevin was out of her life, but distance didn't cool their feelings for each other. From behind bars, Kevin kept in touch with her, and once again, Donna couldn't let go. By 2003, shortly after his release, They decided to get married, believing it would be a fresh start for both of them. Life seemed to be on the right track until tragedy struck. New York City, early morning of November 11, 2006. At 6:30 am on a Saturday, ambulance sirens wailed through the streets of Harlem as NYPD officers and paramedics rushed to a small apartment. Inside, Donna Cobb was in a state of panic, kneeling over her unconscious husband, Kevin, who lay on the floor with a severe chest wound, blood pooling around him. As paramedics took over CPR, police pulled Donna aside to understand what had happened. She stammered, her voice choked with fear. According to Donna's statement that morning, she had been sleeping in her daughter's bed when Kevin suddenly attacked her. He jumped on me. I panicked and ran to the living room, but he chased me, pinned me down, stomped on me, and strangled me until I couldn't breathe. In a desperate struggle, Donna grabbed the first thing within reach, a porcelain elephant statue, and struck Kevin hard on the head. For a brief moment, she managed to turn the tables, but as Kevin collapsed, motionless, blood quickly seeped through his shirt. The police were skeptical of Donna's story. There were no witnesses to back up her claims. Only she and Kevin had been in that room. So far, all they had to go on was Donna's version of events. But why would Kevin try to kill her? How had a couple that reconciled after prison taken such a terrible turn? Donna told the police that in the early years, after Kevin was released from prison in 2003, he had genuinely changed. He spent time with the family, went to church, and tried to be a good husband and father. But that peace only lasted 2 years. After that, Kevin relapsed, and this time, things got worse. Donna claimed that the amount of drugs he used was more than before, and with that came terrifying paranoia. He began suspecting her of infidelity, even though Donna insisted there was no one else. But no matter how much she tried to explain, Kevin refused to believe her. His addiction deepened, and with it came his jealous rage. Kevin started controlling me, Donna said, and his jealousy often ended in violence. But if Kevin was truly abusing her, why didn't Donna leave? The police asked this question, and her answer left them in silence. I stayed for the children, she said. Donna endured the abuse, hid the bruises, and tolerated the fights just to keep the family together. And then, that night happened. Donna recounted that the night before, they had thrown a birthday party for Kevin's cousin. The children were sent to spend the night with relatives, and at first the party was enjoyable. But soon after, a fight broke out between Kevin's cousin and his brother. When it was over, Kevin was the one who had lost. Angry and humiliated, he kicked everyone out and then left, seemingly to find drugs. Donna didn't know where he had been all night. She slept in her daughter's bed and only woke up when Kevin returned around 6 a.m. He had been drinking. Before she could react, Kevin's fury exploded. He jumped on me, hit me, and strangled me. When the police examined her face and neck, they found visible scratches and bruises, as if her story was true. But then, the investigation took a shocking turn when they searched the apartment. The discovery made them question everything. Why hadn't Donna mentioned stabbing Kevin? By late morning on November 11, 2006, Donna Cobb, 38, sat in the interrogation room of the police station. The officers informed her that Kevin had died. Despite everything she had just told them about the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her late husband, she was still in shock and disbelief at the news. But Kevin's death wasn't the only thing that left Donna horrified. The police were beginning to suspect her. While investigating Kevin's background, they confirmed that he had served time for drug offenses, but there was no record of him ever being violent. What was even more alarming was that when investigators searched the couple's apartment, they found signs that someone had attempted to clean up the crime scene. But the most shocking discovery was a small yet haunting object, a simple butter knife covered in blood. Donna had never mentioned stabbing Kevin. When confronted with the evidence, she denied trying to clean the scene. But the police knew one thing for certain: blood had been wiped away. Someone had tried to hide something. And then finally Donna admitted that she had stabbed Kevin. Now, with Kevin dead, all the police had was Donna's account of what really happened on that fateful morning. When Kevin returned home at around 6 a.m. that morning, the children were not home. He lost control. Kevin punched Donna and pulled her hair. After a struggle, she managed to break free from his grip, but she only made it as far as the living room. Kevin quickly caught up and tackled her to the ground. In a panic, Donna tried to turn over and grabbed a porcelain elephant figurine from the floor. She smashed it against Kevin's face, causing him to stumble for a brief moment, just enough time for her to escape again. But only seconds later, Kevin caught her once more in the bedroom. He beat her relentlessly, then tried to strangle her until she couldn't breathe. In a desperate moment, fighting for her life, Donna frantically searched for anything that could help her defend herself. Her hand landed on a knife. Without thinking, she plunged it into Kevin's chest. As she freed herself from his grip and saw the blood pouring out, Donna realized how badly Kevin was wounded. She immediately called 911 and tried to administer first aid. But when the paramedics arrived on the scene, along with the police, Donna lied. She didn't mention the knife. And it was this dishonesty that put the police in a difficult position. Was anything, Donna said, actually true? When someone is caught lying, all of their statements become questionable. In the end, after finishing their interrogation, the police calmly placed Donna in handcuffs. She was charged with second-degree murder, and for a mother of 6, this charge could mean an incredibly harsh sentence. In 2010, nearly 4 years had passed since Donna Cobb admitted to stabbing her husband Kevin. Yet, she still had not had her day in court. The New York District Attorney's Office did not seem in a hurry to prosecute the 42-year-old mother who was raising 6 children alone. On the other hand, the victim, Kevin, was a drug addict, a former convict, and had a history of doing truly terrible things. But that did not mean the prosecution was planning to drop the case. From the day she was arrested on a second-degree murder charge, Donna had lived in limbo for 4 years. And the biggest nightmare she faced was that if convicted, she could be sentenced to life in prison. On September 27, the trial of Donna Cobb officially began. Prosecutors argued that Donna was not a victim of domestic abuse as she claimed. They asserted that most of her allegations about Kevin abusing her were fabricated after the fact to cover up the truth about what she had done. According to Donna's initial statement to the police, she had stabbed Kevin with the knife while he was on top of her. However, when the medical examiner was called to testify, he stated that the autopsy results told a completely different story. Evidence showed that the blade had penetrated Kevin's chest about 3 inches deep, a wound that could not have been caused by a weak thrust. Notably, it was only a butter knife, meaning it would have required significant force to cut through like that. To further support this argument, the prosecution called a crime scene investigator. He pointed out that, contrary to Donna's claims, the blood pattern on the bed indicated that Kevin had not been on top of her when he was stabbed. In fact, he believed Donna had stabbed Kevin while he was lying on his back in bed, possibly while he was asleep. If this evidence was not compelling enough, the prosecution presented another shocking detail. Donna had not called 911 immediately. According to phone records, the first person Donna contacted while her husband was bleeding on the floor was not emergency services, it was her mother. It took another 13 minutes before Donna finally dialed 911, an amount of time that could have made the difference between life and death. When defending herself, Donna firmly denied attacking Kevin while he was asleep. She insisted she had not been standing over him when she stabbed him. However, she also had to admit that she had called her mother before calling emergency services. According to Donna's testimony, the reason she didn't call 911 immediately was that she didn't believe Kevin's life was in danger. After all, the wound had been inflicted with a butter knife. But when she saw that Kevin was still bleeding, she decided to get her phone to call for help. However, Donna testified that Kevin stopped her, urging her not to call. She also admitted to lying to the police out of fear. During the trial, Some of Donna's 6 children testified that Kevin frequently beat her. However, the question remained, was that enough to prove that Donna had acted in self-defense? Prosecutors quickly reminded the jury that at the time Kevin was stabbed, no one else was in the apartment to witness what had actually happened. On October 12, 2010, after nearly 4 years of waiting, Donna Cobb sat in a Manhattan courtroom listening to the jury's decision. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their final verdict. Donna Cobb was not guilty on all charges. The court concluded that Donna had acted reasonably to protect herself from the threat of being killed. As the verdict was announced, Donna and her children broke down in tears of joy. Her friends and supporters were also overjoyed with the outcome. Karen Newell always knew how to attract men, and her new husband was no exception. She was beautiful, charming, and seemed to have it all. Their marriage appeared happy, but just 9 months later, tragedy struck. Her husband was murdered right before her eyes in a brutal robbery. The attackers demanded his wallet, but something felt off. Everything seemed too staged, too perfect to be just a random mugging. Was this truly a simple carjacking? Or was the killer a jealous lover, lurking in the shadows? The deeper the police dug, the more suspicious they became. Was this marriage truly built on love? Or was it from the start a perfect facade to hide a ruthless plan? A plan where the price to be paid was John's life. Orange County, Florida, late night, February 20, 1994. On a desolate highway between Cocoa Beach and Orlando, a car suddenly pulled over. In the dim headlights of passing vehicles, a young woman frantically waved her hands, pleading for help. She approached every car that slowed down, and whenever someone stopped, she uttered only one sentence: "Help me. My husband has been shot." Her name was Karen Newell, and the man lying motionless on the pavement, drenched in blood, was her husband, John. He had been shot multiple times. Several drivers stopped to try and help, but it was too late. When the sheriff arrived at the scene just minutes later, he confirmed what everyone feared: John was dead. According to Karen, that night, she and her husband were driving back home to Orlando after a long day at the beach when their car started having issues. When John stepped out to check under the hood, a small sedan pulled up behind them. 3 men were inside. At first, Karen thought they were stopping to help, but no 2 of them stepped out and immediately demanded John's wallet. Karen recalled that the robbery happened too fast. 1 second, they were simply asking for money, and the next, John collapsed to the ground, shot multiple times. The attackers jumped back into their car, sped off, and left her husband bleeding out by the roadside. But the most horrifying part wasn't just the immediate loss. Karen was pregnant. The killers didn't just take John's life. They took away the father of her unborn child. Karen Newell didn't have an easy life. Growing up in hardship left a deep mark on her, but it couldn't extinguish the strong spirit of this young woman. Despite her captivating beauty, Karen's love life was far from smooth. By the end of her 20s, she had already been married and divorced twice. In the spring of 1993, at the age of 28, Karen seemed more focused on her career. The brunette wasn't just striving for success at work, she was also trying her luck in local beauty pageants, hoping to chase her dream of becoming a model. But perhaps Karen's true stroke of luck didn't come from the runway. It came from a small bar in the suburbs of Orlando. That was where she met John Newell. From the first glance, Karen might have been drawn to the tall man with striking blue eyes. But John wasn't just handsome, he was a master mechanic with a good salary, 2 cars of his own, and a decent amount of savings. That night, John took Karen home, but their connection wasn't just a fleeting romance. He was captivated by her beauty, charm, and perhaps something mysterious that set her apart. As for Karen, she too was swept up in the whirlwind romance with John. Before long, their relationship became more serious than ever. On May 22, 1993, just 2 months after their passionate first night, John and Karen decided to get married. Everything happened so quickly, but both seemed to believe they had found their soulmate. After the wedding, Karen excitedly shared with John about a new career opportunity. She claimed that thanks to her connections in the modeling industry, she had landed a job involving television product promotions. This meant a packed schedule, frequent travel, and constant busyness. But Karen reassured her husband that no matter where she went, she would always come back to him. 7 months into their marriage, Karen announced joyful news. She was pregnant with their first child. John was overwhelmed with happiness. He eagerly awaited the moment he would become a father, believing that the baby's arrival would bring them closer than ever. Sean, a close friend of John's, once said that John loved Karen deeply. He always made an effort to keep the romance alive in their relationship. Just days after Valentine's Day in 1994, the couple even planned a short getaway to the beach, a way to enjoy some sweet moments together before their child was born. But no one could have predicted that this would be one of their last moments together. On Sunday morning, February 20, John and Karen packed their bags, got in their car, and drove an hour east to the beach. They spent the entire day enjoying the fresh ocean breeze before heading back to Orlando in the evening. But as they passed the toll booth at exactly 5:28 p.m. and turned onto State Road 520, things took a strange turn. The car suddenly showed signs of malfunction. John and Karen decided to pull over. John stepped out to check, but within seconds, a horrifying event unfolded. Late Sunday night, February 20, 1994, in Orange County, Florida, a brutal murder occurred on a desolate highway outside Orlando. The victim was John Newell, 29, husband of Karen Newell. By the time police arrived at the scene, John was already dead. His distraught wife, Karen, recounted to detectives that their car had broken down, and just as John stepped out to inspect it, a strange vehicle suddenly pulled up beside them. 3 men got out demanding John's wallet, but in the blink of an eye, according to Karen, one of them pulled out a gun and fired multiple shots at her husband. Despite being in shock, Karen was able to provide police with crucial details. She described the attackers' appearances, their car, and even remembered part of the license plate, along with a distinctive bad boy sticker on the rear window. Police immediately issued an urgent alert and launched a manhunt for the killers. Based on the .22 caliber shell casings found at the scene, investigators determined that the 3 suspects were armed and extremely dangerous. However, one odd detail stood out: the assailants had fled so quickly that they left behind John's wallet, the very thing they had demanded in the first place. That night, law enforcement focused on tracking down the car with the bad boy sticker while also heading to the hospital to continue questioning Karen. She was still distraught but lucid enough to answer their questions. A complex case was beginning to unravel. According to Karen's statement, she and John had spent a joyful day at the beach, where they were later joined by a friend named P.J. Giffen. P.J. was not just a friend, but also Karen's assistant, helping her with film production work. After a long day in the sun and waves, the 3 of them left Karen and John in one car, while P.J. drove separately. On the way back to Orlando, Karen claimed she had been following P.J.'s car, but lost sight of him after passing a toll booth. It was then that her car started malfunctioning, with the steering wheel shaking abnormally. John, a skilled mechanic, told Karen to pull over so he could take a look. Karen stated that they both got out of the car. She walked around to check the wheels, while John inspected under the hood. At that moment, another car suddenly approached from behind. Karen, who was crouched near the front of their vehicle, didn't see everything clearly. Then, gunshots rang out. In the chaos, Karen took cover near the front of the car, confused and terrified by what was happening. She initially thought it was just a robbery, but what she couldn't understand was why the attackers murdered John and then left without taking his wallet. Instead of immediately suspecting the grieving widow of lying, investigators chose to explore other possible leads. Instead of rushing to accuse the newly widowed Karen of lying, investigators decided to broaden their investigation. A police report revealed that not long before John was murdered, there had been an attempted break-in at the Newells' home. Around 9 p.m. that night, as darkness settled outside, Karen heard strange noises coming from the backyard. She immediately alerted John, but as he stepped outside to check, he was suddenly ambushed by two masked men wielding baseball bats. They brutally attacked him, leaving him in a terrible state. Fortunately, a neighbor heard the commotion and turned on their lights, scaring off the assailants. Karen quickly called 911. Though John was not seriously injured, he was unable to provide any useful information beyond the fact that someone had apparently tried to break into their home. At the time, the incident was dismissed as a failed burglary. However, when John was murdered just a few months later, the break-in took on a far more sinister implication. Investigators began interviewing John's friends and family, but no one could point to any known enemies. John was known as a kind-hearted man, always willing to help others. Yet a surprising detail emerged recently. John had taken in a new roommate, none other than Peter P.J. Giffen, Karen's assistant. What raised eyebrows even more was that P.J. had moved in right after the break-in, and according to accounts, it was Karen who had suggested it. "Why don't we let my young assistant move in? He's such a nice guy." John, trusting and easygoing, agreed without hesitation. But now, police began asking a critical question. Was there something suspicious between Karen and PJ? Was their relationship more than what they let on? And if so, was John's death really a random robbery, or was there a deeper, more calculated crime at play? By late February 1994, a week had passed since Karen Newell had witnessed her husband's murder on a deserted stretch of highway outside Orlando, Florida. She claimed that the robbers had suddenly jumped out of their car, confronted John, and demanded his wallet. However, investigators from the Orange County Sheriff's Office were growing increasingly skeptical of her story. They began questioning the relationship between Karen and Peter P.J. Giffen. Were they really just friends? And was the child Karen was carrying truly John's? Shortly after the murder, police summoned P.J. for questioning. He partially corroborated Karen's story about the three of them spending the day at the beach. P.J. claimed that he had consumed 12 cans of daiquiri, smoked marijuana, and then driven home ahead of Karen and John. But when investigators traveled to P.J.'s hometown of Port St. Lucie and started digging, his story began to unravel. Contrary to Karen's claims, P.J. was not her production assistant. In reality, he was nearly jobless, a high school dropout, drifting aimlessly through life. John's friends had long suspected that P.J. and Karen were involved in something more than just friendship. But what shocked investigators even more was how their relationship had actually begun. In the summer of 1993 on Florida's Turnpike, P.J. happened to spot Karen driving alone with a pair of handcuffs in her car. Jokingly, he told her to cuff him. But instead of laughing it off, Karen gave him a sly smile and began flirting with the teenager. Before long, the two had plunged into a secret affair. But while Karen may have seen P.J. as nothing more than a reckless fling, P.J. believed it was true love. He even told friends that he was married to Karen, an absurd claim, but one that revealed much about his mindset. What intrigued police most was P.J.'s potential motive. If Karen was pregnant with his child, then John was the only obstacle standing in their way. And if that were true, P.J. had every reason to want John gone for good. Although confirming the affair between Karen and P.J. provided a clear motive, investigators still needed concrete evidence to link them to the murder. Specifically, they needed to locate the murder weapon, a .22 caliber gun, based on shell casings found at the scene. Over the following days, police questioned the couple's friends, but a shocking revelation came when they spoke with one of Karen's ex-husbands. They discovered something even more suspicious. P.J. wasn't the only man Karen had been involved with. She had remained in contact with her ex-husband and had even borrowed a gun from him. At the time, her request seemed reasonable to the former spouse, especially given that John had recently survived a brutal baseball bat attack. But the most incriminating detail? The gun Karen borrowed was a .22 caliber, the exact same type as the murder weapon. A simple ballistics test could confirm if this was the gun used in the killing. However, when police asked Karen's ex to turn over the firearm, they hit a roadblock. Karen had never returned it. Now investigators were certain she was involved in the crime. But rather than rushing to arrest her, they needed ironclad evidence that would hold up in court. As they dug deeper into her past, they unearthed another crucial detail. Back in 1989, Karen had a criminal record for credit card fraud. On February 28, 8 days after her husband's murder, Karen Newell was arrested by the Orange County Sheriff's Office for violating her probation. While she was in custody, investigators continued gathering evidence. They interviewed a man named Louis Aragona, Karen's stepbrother, and uncovered a bombshell revelation. According to Louis, as early as the summer of 1993, Karen had approached him with a chilling proposal. John had a $500 life insurance policy, and she wanted Louis to help plan his murder so she could cash in. Louis refused to take part in the shooting, but he revealed something even more disturbing. Karen had already attempted to kill John in November 1993 with P.J. Giffen as her accomplice. Their plan was to murder John in his own home. However, when P.J. attacked, John cried out in pain, prompting neighbors to turn on their lights and look outside. Fearing exposure, P.J. panicked and fled. Karen didn't give up. Just days after the failed attack, she again reached out to Louis, urging him to help her carry out the plan. Once again he refused, but P.J., he didn't. This revelation marked a major breakthrough in the investigation. If Louis's account was true, it proved that Karen and P.J. had conspired to kill John long before the supposed random robbery took place. By late March 1994, the case had reached a turning point. Acting on a search warrant, police discovered a safe in John's home, registered in Karen's name. Inside, they found a trove of financial documents, including all of John's life insurance policies. The most shocking find, a $500,000 life insurance policy with Karen as the sole beneficiary. Not only that, but investigators uncovered a damning fact. In the week following John's death, Karen had already begun withdrawing money from the insurance payouts. She showed no signs of grief. Instead, she had swiftly contacted the insurance companies, demanding the money. The evidence was undeniable. This was no random robbery. It was a carefully orchestrated murder for money scheme. On March 28, 1994, less than a month after P.J. Giffen's arrest, both Karen and her teenage lover were officially charged with the murder of John Newell. In the trial of Karen Newell, prosecutors painted a picture of a cunning woman who had planned her husband's murder from the very beginning of their relationship. They argued that Karen had set her sights on John Newell as early as March 1993, not for love, but for his life insurance money. Just weeks after their wedding in May 1993, she secured the first $250,000 policy, then continued adding more over their 9-month marriage. This ensured that when John died, Karen would become rich. But she needed someone else to pull the trigger, and Peter P.J. Giffen was the perfect pawn. According to prosecutors, Karen used her charm to manipulate P.J., a naive young man, turning him into a killer. She promised love, used sex as a weapon, and even lied about being pregnant with his child to deepen his involvement in the plot. But that lie unraveled the night John was killed. When Karen was taken to the hospital, doctors ran a pregnancy test. It was negative. Even more damning, her medical records revealed that she had previously undergone tubal ligation, making pregnancy impossible. With this mountain of evidence, prosecutors were convinced that Karen was not just guilty of murder, she was a cold-blooded mastermind willing to do anything to get what she wanted. They sought the death penalty. The final piece of evidence came from P.J. Giffen's own testimony. Facing the possibility of a death sentence, he broke his silence in the interrogation room. He confessed everything: the affair, the murder plot, and how Karen had manipulated him into carrying it out. According to PJ, after their failed attempt to kill John with a baseball bat in November 1993, Karen immediately devised a new plan. On February 20, 1994, she, John, and PJ spent the day at the beach, enjoying themselves as if nothing was wrong. But on the drive back to Orlando, she created the perfect opportunity for PJ to strike. Karen drove ahead while PJ followed in his own car. After passing a toll booth, Karen pretended to have car trouble. She told John they needed to pull over and check the vehicle. As they stopped on the roadside, PJ, with the murder weapon in hand, approached. Without hesitation, he aimed the gun at John's head and said, "Consider this a divorce." Then he pulled the trigger. John collapsed, but PJ didn't stop. He fired 3 more shots into John's chest, ensuring he was dead. PJ's confession not only sealed Karen's fate, but also led investigators to the most critical piece of physical evidence, the murder weapon. He revealed that after the killing, he had tossed the gun into a lake a few miles from the crime scene. When police searched the designated area, they found the weapon. Ballistics tests confirmed it was the gun that fired the fatal bullets, but the most damning evidence? The gun's serial number matched the firearm Karen had borrowed from her ex-husband before the attack. This directly linked her to the murder weapon, proving she had orchestrated every detail of her deadly plan. With PJ's testimony, the recovered gun, and a clear financial motive, prosecutors had everything they needed to charge Karen with first-degree murder. Karen Newell's case was no longer a mystery. She had not only manipulated a teenager into killing for her, but had also calculated every move to ensure her plan's success. But would she receive the death penalty as prosecutors hoped? That decision lay in the hands of the jury. Facing overwhelming evidence, Karen Newell had no choice but to take a plea deal to avoid execution. The agreement between her defense and prosecutors spared her from the death sentence, but sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for P.J. Giffen, despite being the one who pulled the trigger, his cooperation with authorities earned him a reduced charge of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison, a price for being manipulated into Karen's deadly scheme. The case closed with both conspirators behind bars, but the tragedy remained. A man lost his life, all because of greed and the betrayal of a wife he had trusted. Abraham Shakespeare won the lottery jackpot, his life changing in an instant. But not long after, he mysteriously disappeared. People said that he was surrounded by money hunters who saw him as nothing more than a cash cow. And then Didi Moore appeared, a successful businesswoman who claimed to be Abraham's trustworthy friend. But was she really helping him? Or was there something darker hidden behind the facade? Plant City, Florida, January 26, 2010. One of the biggest mysteries in Tampa's history was about to be revealed. Dozens of reporters crowded together. Camera lenses pointed directly at a piece of land being excavated. Everyone was waiting for the answer to the question that had haunted the public for months. Abraham Shakespeare, the lottery millionaire who had vanished without a trace, was he still alive or already dead? 3 years after his life-changing win, Abraham suddenly went missing, and no one knew where he was. In November 2009, his family reported him to the police, but no one had any leads on his whereabouts. Nearly 2 months later, the case took a chilling turn. A mysterious excavation began after the police received information from none other than Abraham's close friend and financial advisor, Didi Moore. There were up to 30, maybe even 40 news crews gathered at the scene, eager to capture the first glimpse of what could be the ultimate proof of Abraham Shakespeare's fate. And as the last layer of soil was lifted, the truth began to emerge. Born in 1972 in Plant City, Florida, Doris Donegan, also known as Didi, always longed for a better life. As a child, she was an active member of women's Bible study classes, but as she grew older, she started feeling that something was missing. She became increasingly aware of her humble origins, a reality she tried to hide throughout her high school years. But instead of letting poverty hold her back, Didi nurtured an unrelenting determination. She was going to succeed at all costs. After graduating, Didi enrolled in training courses and became a certified nursing assistant CNA. Not long after, she married James Moore, a man from Plant City, and 3 years later, they welcomed a son. But Didi didn't want to settle for a stable job. She wanted more. In 2004, fueled by her burning ambition, Didi started her own business and quickly found success. From a girl who grew up in poverty, she rose to become a wealthy and powerful woman. But Didi wasn't satisfied with simply enjoying her riches. She wanted to share her story, to inspire others with her journey from rags to riches by writing a book. And then, fate led her to Abraham Shakespeare, the man who had won millions in the lottery. This encounter not only changed Didi's life, but also marked the beginning of a horrifying mystery. Abraham Shakespeare grew up in Lakeland, Florida, in circumstances even harsher than Didi. He dropped out of school early, but instead of following the path of many other young men in the neighborhood who fell into gangs or drug addiction, Abraham chose to become a hard-working laborer. He was not an addict, nor was he a criminal, but his life seemed destined to be a constant struggle with meager wages. Until one day, everything changed. In October 2006, in a rare moment of luck, Abraham bought a lottery ticket at a convenience store. And no one could have imagined that the ticket would win him a $30 million jackpot. Choosing to receive a lump sum payment after taxes, Abraham took home approximately $12.7 million. From a manual laborer, he stepped into the world of millionaires. He bought a mansion in an upscale neighborhood, purchased a fleet of BMWs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But fortune came quickly and disappeared just as fast. In less than 2 years of spending and generously lending money to friends, Abraham's bank account rapidly dwindled. By the end of 2008, when he met Didi Moore, he had only a little over $1 million left. This meeting was no coincidence. A mutual friend had arranged for Didi to meet Abraham, and immediately Didi realized he didn't need a writer to tell his story. He needed a financial manager. And Didi, with her extensive business experience, was ready to take on that role. Before long, Didi was not only helping Abraham manage his finances, but also assisting him in recovering up to $8 million stat he had lent to friends over the past 2 years. But did Didi truly want to help Abraham, or did she have an entirely different plan? This question could only be answered by the horrifying truth that followed. On November 9, 2009, a man named Cedric Adama walked into the police station with growing concern. His cousin, Abraham Shakespeare, the man whose life had changed after winning millions from the Florida lottery, had vanished without a trace. Cedric was not the only one who had borrowed money from Abraham, but unlike many others, he claimed to have fully repaid his debt. However, what was strange was that for the past 8 months, Cedric had not directly returned the money to Abraham, but had instead transferred it to a woman named Didi Moore. And now, after 7 months without any news from his cousin, Cedric decided to report Abraham's disappearance to the police. The police immediately launched an investigation, and the first person they sought out was Didi Moore. At that time, Didi had recently divorced, but more significantly, she had moved into the multi-million-dollar mansion that previously belonged to Abraham Shakespeare. When asked, Didi showed no signs of worry or secrecy. She explained that Abraham had voluntarily sold the house to her at his own request. Not only that, but he had also given her full control over most of his assets. She even provided a signed power of attorney from Abraham to prove her statement. Didi enthusiastically cooperated, providing all financial records related to Abraham. But there was one crucial question she could not answer. Where exactly was Abraham Shakespeare? According to Didi, Abraham had decided to keep his whereabouts a secret, even from her. But she insisted she was still in contact with him. To prove it, right in front of the investigators, Didi pulled out her phone and sent a message. "Abraham, everyone is looking for you. Please respond immediately." While waiting for a response from Abraham, The investigation team expanded their search. They began reaching out to his friends and family for clues. But what shocked the police was that no one had seen or heard from Abraham in months, not even his own mother, who hadn't seen her son for a long time. However, even though no one had actually made contact with Abraham, they heard countless rumors about him. Some people said he was in Jamaica. Others believed he was hiding in Orlando. But when the police traced the origins of these rumors, they discovered one common point: they all came from Diddy Moore. The question arose, was Diddy really helping Abraham hide for some reason, or was she concealing a more horrifying truth? In the following weeks, as investigators closely monitored Diddy Moore, everything started shifting from strange to suspicious. The deeper the detectives investigated, the more they felt something was wrong. Initially, they thought this was just a missing person case, but over time, a more terrifying suspicion emerged. Was Abraham Shakespeare even still alive? A crucial discovery surfaced on April 6, the time Abraham was believed to have disappeared. Before that, his phone had been working normally, but after that day, everything abruptly changed. Abraham's phone wasn't completely silent, but investigators noticed something odd. Every time Abraham sent a message or contacted Didi, both phones connected to the same cell tower. This couldn't be a coincidence. It suggested that Didi Moore was likely in possession of Abraham's phone and was using it to mislead people. But even though they suspected her, there was still no direct evidence proving that Didi had killed him. So was Abraham really in hiding, or had something terrible happened? 2 days before Christmas, after months without any sign of Abraham, the police decided to confront Didi once again this time. They wouldn't let her easily escape their tough questions, and this time they were determined to make her tell the truth. On Christmas Eve 2009, after more than 8 months of disappearance, something unexpected happened. It seemed that someone other than Didi Moore had finally heard from Abraham Shakespeare. Abraham's mother received a mysterious phone call. The voice on the line claimed to be her son, but the call ended quickly. Even stranger? The call came from a private number, making it untraceable. Less than 24 hours later, investigators took action. They tracked the GPS signal from the phone call and traced it to a shopping mall in Lakeland. Without hesitation, they rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they spotted something familiar: Didi Moore's car parked in the lot. At that moment, Didi was meeting a man, handing him something before quickly leaving. Investigators immediately approached. Could this be the elusive Abraham Shakespeare they had been searching for? But as they got closer, they quickly realized a shocking truth. The man in the car was not Abraham. It was Greg Smith. When questioned, Greg revealed that Didi had just paid him $5,000 to call Abraham's mother and pretend to be her son. But Greg had no knowledge of Abraham's actual whereabouts. He simply believed the millionaire was in hiding to avoid those searching for him. However, when investigators revealed the truth, that they suspected Abraham was dead and that Didi Moore might be responsible, Greg made a decision that changed everything. He agreed to cooperate with the police. Mid-January, 2 weeks after Greg Smith agreed to cooperate, the Polk County Sheriff held a shocking press conference. He announced that the disappearance of Abraham Shakespeare was now considered a murder case, and the prime suspect was Didi Moore. Didi reacted with complete surprise, claiming she was utterly shocked by the accusation. But just a few days later, she proactively reached out to Greg Smith, and that was her biggest mistake. Greg immediately reported to the investigators, and they quickly devised a trap. They instructed Greg to call Didi back, mentioning someone with a drug-related criminal record in the federal system, someone who could take the fall for Abraham's death. Didi took the bait instantly. She wanted a meeting. On January 21, the meeting took place. But there was one thing Didi was unaware of: the man she believed would take the blame for her was actually an undercover police officer. During the meeting, Didi was cautious but couldn't entirely hide the truth. She insisted that the police were trying to set her up, but vaguely admitted that Abraham was dead. However, she also added something strange. He will return. He will return on Christmas. But then Didi revealed her true nature. She offered to pay the man to take the blame. She was willing to pay any amount, but the undercover officer didn't stop there. He continued to press her, pushing Didi to reveal details about the murder and the location of Abraham's body. Didi hesitated but eventually said, "Let me see if I can find out." That sentence was enough to mark a turning point in the investigation. The trap was closing in, and Didi Moore's time was running out. 4 days later, on January 25, Didi Moore arranged another meeting with Greg Smith. But this time, she didn't just bring words, she brought deadly evidence. In her hands was a .38 caliber Wesson revolver. She handed it to Greg without hesitation. Then she drove to a house in Plant City, a house she had purchased using Abraham Shakespeare's money. Upon arrival, Didi pointed to a specific spot and coldly said, "His body is right here." Greg Smith knew he had just obtained the most crucial piece of evidence. He immediately reported to the Polk County Sheriff. Less than 24 hours later, investigators arrived, quietly beginning excavation, while dozens of reporters from across Central Florida watched their every move. The search lasted nearly 48 hours. And then, on January 28, the horrifying truth was finally revealed. Abraham Shakespeare's body had been found. Identified through fingerprints, the medical examiner concluded that Abraham had been shot twice in the chest. As the news spread, grief filled the air. His family was present at the scene, their cries echoing through the crowd, "God will bring justice." But investigators didn't have to look far for the prime suspect. The moment Abraham's body was discovered, Didi Moore did something no one expected. She called the police herself. "We need to talk." At the investigation office, Didi gave a dramatic account. She claimed that the person who killed Abraham wasn't her, but a man named Ronald. According to Didi, one night in April, Abraham walked into her office with Ronald and another drug dealer. They demanded money from a safe, but everything quickly spiraled out of control. Abraham argued with them. Then they shot him. Didi continued, claiming that the killers took all the money from the safe, forced her to transfer more, and even pointed a gun at her face. "I was so scared," she emphasized, trying to convince investigators that she was just another victim. But this time, no one believed her anymore. Didi's story might change, but the evidence did not. The interrogation ended, and shortly after, the Polk and Hillsborough County Police worked together to finalize the arrest warrant. Since Abraham Shakespeare's body was found, reporters had swarmed the crime scene. But they didn't stop there. They also camped outside Didi Moore's house, waiting for any movement from the woman suspected of being a murderer. Then, on February 2, surrounded by cameras, Didi finally emerged. No more avoiding, no more hiding. She faced the media. A defiant, yet emotional Didi. Sometimes, everyone has moments of feeling terrible. She choked. She cried, her voice trembling. But were those tears of remorse, or just another performance? After her final words, Didi got into her car, preparing to leave as dozens of cameras captured every moment. But she didn't know that this ride wouldn't take her home. The moment she started her car, she was blocked. Police swarmed in. Right then and there, Didi Moore was officially arrested, charged with first-degree murder. Tampa, Florida, November 28, 2012. Under the glaring lights of the Hillsborough County courtroom, Didi Moore was led in. The once glamorous woman with golden blonde hair now looked more haggard than ever after nearly 3 years in custody. Today, she stood trial for the most ruthless crime, murder for money. Prosecutors wasted no time, opening with a sharp statement. Didi Moore took advantage of Abraham Shakespeare's kindness, easily manipulating him due to his lack of financial knowledge. And when she could no longer drain him of money, she chose the quickest and most ruthless way to take everything by killing him. To prove this, they called a financial expert who had meticulously analyzed every account belonging to Didi Moore and Abraham himself. Bank statements, checks, and transactions showed that by the spring of 2009, Didi had complete control over Abraham's remaining lottery winnings. She spent lavishly like a queen: Dom Perignon champagne, Rolex watches, diamond jewelry. a $90,000 Corvette, and luxurious vacations from Las Vegas to New York.
But the key turning point in the case came on December 5, when a crucial witness, Abraham's former personal assistant, took the stand.
She recounted that in late March 2009, Abraham had frantically come to her. He told her he had tried to withdraw money from the bank, but discovered that his account had been emptied. Completely devastated, Abraham realized that his financial advisor, the person he had trusted, was actually the one who had stolen all his remaining money. Determined not to stay silent, this witness called Dee directly, confronting her about the fact that Abraham had discovered the truth. Just a few days later, on April 6, 2009, Abraham Shakespeare vanished forever. Although there were no direct witnesses to the murder, prosecutors believed they had pieced together enough evidence to reconstruct the chilling truth of how Dee Moore murdered Abraham Shakespeare. They admitted that no one had seen the exact moment Dee pulled the trigger, but her own words had inadvertently provided a solid theory. Dee had told investigators that a mysterious drug cartel had shot Abraham right in her office and stolen all the money from the safe. But prosecutors asserted no such cartel existed. There was only Dee Moore and Abraham Shakespeare. According to the prosecution's theory, on that fateful day, Abraham had gone to Dee's office. As he walked in, she opened the safe, making it seem as if she was about to give him his money. But instead of pulling out a stack of cash, she took out a gun. 2 gunshots rang out. Abraham collapsed. Then Dee began erasing the evidence. A search of her office after her arrest revealed crucial evidence. A portion of the carpet had been cut out, and when analyzed, investigators found traces of blood soaked into the floor. DNA analysis confirmed it was Abraham Shakespeare's blood. The final and most damning piece of evidence, the .38 caliber revolver that Dee had given to Greg Smith, the police informant. When examined, the bullets recovered from Abraham's body were a perfect match for that gun. On December 10, 2012, the Florida jury delivered its final verdict in the trial of Dee Moore. The former nursing assistant and 40-year-old businesswoman was convicted of first-degree murder. After days of intense deliberation, they needed no more time to consider. The decision was clear. Dee Moore was found guilty of murdering Abraham Shakespeare.
Her sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. From a woman who once lived lavishly off her victim's fortune, Dee Moore now faced the rest of her life behind bars, a place with no diamonds, no luxury cars, and no more lies to cover up her crime. A broken family, a brutal murder, and secrets gradually uncovered. Lori Cohn and her daughter Jackie were never truly close. But when tragedy struck Lori's husband and Jackie's father, Jack Cohn was murdered in his own home, everything changed. Jack was beaten to death in a violent break-in, leaving the 2 women in shock and grief. At first, the loss seemed to bring them closer. But soon doubts arose and suspicion crept into every conversation. As their relationship fractured, they began to turn against each other. Who was truly behind the murder? As fingers point and accusations fly, the police must unravel buried secrets to uncover the truth. And in moments of desperation, people are capable of things no one could ever imagine. San Bernardino, California to OM, April 2, 2012. A 911 call pierced the quiet night. Jackie Cohn, 23, trembled as she dialed, fearing for her father, Jack Cohn, 64. She and her mother, Lori Cohn, 47, had just returned home to a horrifying scene, the front door wide open, Jack's truck missing. As Jackie tried to explain the situation to the dispatcher, Lori rushed inside. Seconds later, she returned, her face pale, snatching the phone from her daughter's hand. Her voice shook with panic. "I can't find my husband." Still holding the phone, Lori ventured deeper into the dark house, stepping into the back bedroom. She fumbled in the darkness, her eyes scanning the room until they stopped. Jack Cohn lay there, in a pool of blood, beaten to death. When police and paramedics arrived, they quickly realized there was nothing they could do to save Jack Cohn. He had been brutally beaten to death, his hands and feet tightly bound with rope and duct tape, his body covered in wounds. The room reeked of blood, bearing the marks of a violent attack.
Jack was not just an ordinary man. He was a licensed gun dealer who owned hundreds of firearms in his home. And now he was dead.
At the scene, the police quickly separated Laurie and Jackie for questioning. Laurie, still in shock, said that she and her daughter had been gambling at the casino all night.
When they returned home, they found the front door wide open and Jack lying motionless on the bedroom floor. Sitting on the grass in front of the house, Laurie sobbed, her voice breaking as she spoke of her late husband. He was my best friend.
Born in 1965 in California, Laurie Jean Gibson was not the type of woman to easily break down in tears.
She was confident, tough, a woman who had learned to survive from a young age.
Laurie grew up in poverty and started working at 15 to support herself. But her life truly hit rock bottom in 1984 when she had nowhere to go and not a single penny to her name.
At just 19 years old, she wandered through San Bernardino, taking odd jobs to survive. A friend took her in, offering her shelter and even hiring her for household tasks. It was during this time that Laurie met her friend's older brother, a man who would change her life forever. Jack Cohn was 17 years older than Laurie and a modestly successful man. He ran a TV repair shop in San Bernardino, where many locals had brought their televisions for servicing. In addition, Jack was a licensed firearms dealer, a business that provided him with a steady income.
He was funny, kind, and generous. Despite his stable career, Jack remained single at 36 until he met Laurie. That changed quickly. Just weeks after they met, Laurie moved in with Jack at his home, which doubled as his repair shop. Jack provided her with a place to stay, and in return, Laurie helped out at the store, answering calls and assisting with daily tasks. What began as an employer-employee relationship soon turned into something more. In 1989, they welcomed their daughter, Jackie, their only child.
She became the bond that brought Laurie and Jack closer than ever. Jack adored Jackie, spoiling her unconditionally.
As Jackie started school, Laurie took on a bigger role in helping Jack expand his business.
Over a decade together, their marriage seemed solid and stable. But even as life appeared peaceful, cracks began to form, especially in Laurie's relationship with her daughter. Jackie, once a daddy's girl, became a rebellious teenager. She got into trouble at school, struggled with authority, and, most notably, had a strained relationship with her mother. While Jack continued to indulge his daughter, Laurie felt increasingly pushed aside, fueling tensions between husband and wife. In the years that followed, Jackie's life spiraled out of control. She married young, had several children, but her marriage failed. Eventually, she turned to drugs, not just using methamphetamine, but also dealing it.
In early 2012, Jackie was arrested. Jack was devastated to see his daughter handcuffed and taken away by the police.
But when she was released at the end of March, the aging father welcomed her back with open arms, continuing to care for her without hesitation. Surprisingly, this time, even Laurie seemed happy to have Jackie back. She decided to put past conflicts aside and invited her daughter out for a night together.
The two spent the entire night at the casino, but as they drove home at 4 a.m. on April 2, 2012, a horrifying tragedy awaited them.
In the early hours of April 2, 2012, in San Bernardino, California, Laurie Cohn discovered her husband, Jack Cohn, beaten to death inside their home. A brutal murder, but was it a robbery gone wrong or something far darker? When police arrived at the scene, all initial signs pointed to a violent break-in. Someone had entered the house in the middle of the night and encountered Jack. But it seemed the intruders weren't just after ordinary valuables. Jack wasn't just a TV and satellite repairman. He was also a licensed gun dealer who owned hundreds of firearms. In an area rife with gang activity that made him a particularly dangerous target, Jack was not a careless man. He was extremely cautious about protecting his assets and his life. All his firearms were stored in a specially locked room, secured behind a heavy-duty safe door.
He had even installed a surveillance camera system, turning his home into a true fortress.
But on the night of the murder, None of these security measures mattered. The killers cleaned out the gunroom, stole Jack's truck to transport their loot, and even took the DVR containing footage from the surveillance cameras.
And yet, there was something strange. The intruders hadn't touched the store's safe,
which contained $9,000 in cash. Evidence at the scene suggested Jack had been awakened in the middle of the night. When found, he was still wearing his pajamas. His hands and feet were bound with rope, and his neck had been restrained. It appeared that the attackers had tortured him, trying to force him to open the safe. When he refused to cooperate, they beat him to death. At the crime scene, Lori and her daughter Jackie seemed completely devastated by Jack's tragic death. They cried, appeared in shock, and struggled to process what had happened. But as the police looked closer, something didn't add up. How had the intruders so easily bypassed Jack's security system? How could a heavily secured home be broken into with no signs of forced entry or significant struggle? Police quickly began to suspect that this wasn't just a random burglary. It might have been an inside job. It didn't take long for them to identify a possible accomplice. The first name on their list of suspects was Jackie. Early information suggested that Jackie might have leaked details about her father's security system to some acquaintances, leading them directly to the house on that fateful night while she and her mother were away. Lori appeared shocked and confused when she heard this theory. She cooperated with the police, even admitting that she had her own doubts about her daughter. Jackie had a criminal record, a history of drug addiction, and had been involved in multiple troubles before. But when detectives asked Lori point blank whether she believed Jackie could have killed her own father, she hesitated. After a moment of silence, Lori finally said, "She's still Jack's daughter. I don't think she could do it. Even if Jackie was somehow involved, there was a major problem. She had an alibi." Lori insisted that the two of them had been gambling at the casino all night. This complicated the case for the police. They decided to review surveillance footage from the casino to verify Lori's story. And the footage confirmed it. Lori and Jackie had indeed been at the casino, gambling throughout the night. But then Jackie revealed a shocking secret about her mother. Jackie sat there, tears streaming down her face, as she told the police the truth about her parents' marriage, a truth she had long chosen to ignore. "My mother had a gambling problem. When she lost too much, she started pawning my dad's stuff, then selling it outright. But that wasn't the worst part. She was addicted to meth too," Jackie choked out. The police were stunned by this revelation. From the beginning of the case, Lori had appeared as a grieving wife, shattered by her husband's death. But if what Jackie said was true, Lori wasn't just a heartbroken widow, she was a woman hiding dark secrets. Jackie continued, "My dad knew about the gambling. They fought about it all the time. But things got worse when my mom lost too much money. He worked so hard his whole life, but she just threw it all away at the casino. The fights got worse, and I think she wanted to get rid of him." The officers listened intently as the pieces of the case started to come together. Could Lori have been behind Jack's murder? Had she arranged for someone to kill him to cover up her debts and addiction? Jackie had just exposed a completely different narrative, one that could turn Lori from a witness into a suspect. She recalled a moment that now sent chills down her spine, seeing the name Shauna Bayliss appear on her mother's phone screen, a name tied to a world of crime and drugs. "Shauna called my mom and asked about Jack's keys," Jackie said, her voice trembling. The police immediately understood the significance of this detail. If Shauna had called Lori to ask about the keys, it was highly likely that Lori had given them access to Jack's house. And if that was true, this wasn't a random burglary, it was a planned robbery with Lori's involvement. Jackie went on, "My mom got involved with those people after my dad kicked her out. She had no money, nowhere to go, and they gave her a place to stay in exchange for drugs." The police started piecing the timeline together. Jack had finally had enough and kicked Lori out of the house. Homeless and desperate, Lori fell in with criminals and addicts. Over time, she became entangled with them. When Jackie was released from jail, Lori wanted to mend their relationship, so she took her daughter out for the night on the same night Jack was murdered. But on their way home, Laurie received a call from Shauna, a woman connected to dangerous criminals. If Jackie was telling the truth, Jack's murder wasn't an accident. It was a carefully planned crime. The only question that remained was Laurie just a pawn in this scheme, or had she orchestrated the entire plan to have her husband killed? On April 4, 2012, more than 48 hours after she called 911 and reported that Jack was dead, police arrested Laurie Cohn for conspiracy to commit murder.
That same day, officers knocked on the door of Shauna Bayless. Just as investigators were handcuffing Shauna, an unidentified man bolted from the back of her house and jumped into a swimming pool.
Police pulled him out and identified him as a criminal named Gary Gallion. Once in custody, Gary refused to speak, but Shauna did.
She gave up names, revealed key details, and started with a confession, openly admitting her involvement.
Shauna stated that Laurie was furious and devastated after Jack kicked her out of the house. That's when she and Gary began plotting the robbery. Shauna also claimed that Laurie had told Gary exactly how to disable Jack's security system.
The first thing you do when you get inside that room is take the DVR, Laurie allegedly instructed.
On the night of April 1, Laurie went to a casino to establish an alibi. She was there with her daughter, while Shauna drove Gary to Jack's store. Gary was supposed to steal Jack's truck for his getaway, but the plan hit a snag.
Frustrated, he called Shauna and said, "Hey, the gate is locked." Shauna then called Laurie and asked which of Jack's many keys would open the gate.
"The green one," Laurie replied. According to Shauna, not long after, Gary arrived at her house with Jack's stolen truck.
Loaded with stolen goods, TVs, rifles, and more.
It was only then, Shauna claimed, that Gary told her Jack had been murdered.
On February 26, 2013, at the San Bernardino County Court, Laurie Cohn and Gary Gallion officially stood trial for murder. Both were charged with the killing of Jack Cohn, Laurie's husband, in April of the previous year. Prosecutors argued that Laurie harbored deep resentment after being thrown out of the house, which ultimately drove her to plan her husband's murder.
The third accomplice in the conspiracy, Shauna Bayless, pleaded guilty and cooperated with the authorities.
She testified that Laurie had approached her for help in finding someone to carry out the burglary, and that person was none other than Gary Gallion. During the 9 months Laurie was in custody awaiting trial, she changed so drastically that friends and former neighbors barely recognized
her. She had lost significant weight and appeared gaunt and pale.
The most shocking testimony came from Laurie's daughter, Jackie. Standing before the jury, Jackie recounted how her mother was a compulsive gambler, drowning in debt, and had been kicked out of the house just months before Jack was murdered. Prosecutors argued that this was the breaking point that led Laurie to hatch her deadly plan. Shauna also testified in court, detailing Laurie's involvement from recruiting Gary for the burglary to instructing him on how to bypass Jack's security system.
According to Shauna, Laurie made it clear that the first priority was to seize the DVR,
ensuring no evidence was left behind. However, Gary made a critical mistake. He hid the DVR in a trash bin near a liquor store in San Bernardino.
Police later found it completely intact. Though the footage did not capture Jack's murder, it clearly showed Gary breaking into Jack's gunroom.
This meant he had not covered his face or attempted to conceal his identity. And if there were still any doubts about Laurie's motive, another witness stepped forward, Charles Duke. Charles testified that months before Jack's murder, Laurie had directly approached him with a murder-for-hire proposal, offering several $1,000s.
His testimony was the final puzzle piece, completing the picture of a meticulously planned crime, not just a random burglary gone wrong.
As the trial reached its decisive phase, Gary Gallion stood up, hoping to turn the tide in his favor.
He desperately tried to deny all accusations, insisting that he had no involvement in the crime.
However, prosecutors swiftly dismantled his lies. They presented a series of undeniable evidence from Shauna Bayless' testimony and the recovered DVR footage to Charles Duke's incriminating statement.
Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Gary was the one who carried out the break-in and murdered Jack Cohn,
all according to Laurie's plan. After hours of intense deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict.
They declared that Laurie Cohn had hired Gary Gallion not just to rob, but to kill her husband, all to fund her insatiable gambling addiction. Given the ruthless nature of their crimes, the harshest sentence was handed down: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
Laurie Cohn and Gary Gallion would never walk free again.
As the courtroom doors closed, the case that had shocked many came to an end. But in its place, a permanent sentence was sealed, one that ensured those who had killed out of greed would never see the outside world again.